Welcome to another episode of the Harder to Breathe podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dusick. I was the founding drummer of Maroon 5, but I'm now a registered therapist, author, and mental health advocate. With me, as always, is my co-host, Duck Maillard. How you doing, Duck?
Hey, buddy. I'm good. I'm surrounded by new gear, which for those of us in the music industry know is like, Christmas morning. Got a new microphone, got a new camera, and get to try a bunch of new things. So
you've been talking enviously about my SM7B microphone since we started this podcast.
Yeah. Hopefully I sound good.
Well, you do. It's got a rich tone. You already have a rich baritone voice, as you
Basso
know.
profundo. Sorry.
But it works. No, it accentuates it even more. So it's lovely.
No, I'm enjoying it. And, it's nice to, hopefully sound a little bit better to everybody at home.
So we've got quite a show today. An old friend of mine, Sara Bareilles, is on this episode. And, it's just, we've already done the conversation with her, so we know what's coming. And it really was a pleasure to see her and talk to her again. It's been a while. I mean, we've kind of kept in touch from afar. We've exchanged texts and emails, and I've congratulated her the best I could on all of her accomplishments. But to be face to face again and talk, and just really get into some things as we did, it's a pleasure for me. It's something that's been a long time coming, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy the conversation that we had. How did you feel about it, Doug?
I was impressed by. I mean, we've had mental health professionals, we've had motivational speakers, we've had CEOs. And I have to say, Sara was one of the most evolved, in terms of the topics that we talk about on this podcast. I mean, she has such a healthy relationship with anxiety and fear and the things that she had to deal with, like that we all have, that I was just really impressed that the ease of language that she used talking about it. She really seemed to have a grasp of her own journey. And I think listeners are going to find a lot of help in that, because she, like I said, she's someone who, it's like we've talked about, has achieved incredible success, but still has had to overcome some of the things that we all deal with. And the way she talks about it really makes it accessible to everyone. So
yeah, well, she's very articulate on top of all of those things. And it's amazing. There's sides of her that I think that the public are just starting to get to know, that I've known of her since she was a college student, and she was always very witty, and being sort of a serious singer-songwriter, 2-time Grammy winner. She's been nominated for 3 Emmys and 3 Tony Awards, just all the accomplishments. You think of her as this very serious artist, and then she turns around and she's done Girls 5 Eva to show this other side of her. I knew her in college as very silly and very fun. And so it didn't surprise me to see that, but I love that willingness to sort of embrace all aspects of herself. And then the willingness to come on a show like this and to be vulnerable. It's like, how do you navigate all of that and still maintain a certain image? You have to have a lot of grace and a lot of poise, and sort of, just the way that she's able to articulate ideas and feelings and be relatable.
And also a lot of comfort and confidence in who you are. I mean, she talks about not wanting to do things. I don't want to give too much away, like not wanting to do things unless she really kind of believes in them. And so I don't think, if I may speak for her, I don't think that there's a lot of fear or danger in coming on a podcast like this where she has to get vulnerable and open, because I feel like she's the type of person who is comfortable doing that. Right.
So, I mean, it's inspiring for me. I look at the things that she's doing, and it's more than inspiring. It's aspirational as much as inspirational, because I don't feel like anything that she's doing is outside of her wheelhouse. It's like everything is sort of, we've talked a lot about authenticity on this show thus far, and being something to aspire to, but also just the thing that works best as an artist, or as anything in any space you step into. If you're authentic, it shines through. And so recognizing, like, in her, the ability to step into new spaces, take on new challenges, but stay authentic to herself.
Yeah.
That's what's really inspirational to me, because that can be a challenge. I mean, we all face that dilemma of walking into a new space and, who am I going to be? Do I have to change who I am? Do I need to step into a different...
Do I have the courage to stick to my guns and be who I know I am, rather than putting on a brave face or putting on a personality that I think is what people want to see?
Yeah. Absolutely.
We didn't even talk about one of the things, her song Brave, which of course everyone knows, has, become an anthem to the LGBTQ plus community.
Right.
It's also, I know, is being used. People are printing them on hospital gowns for children who are undergoing cancer treatment, things like that.
Right.
So I love the fact that people have locked on to that authenticity and the message that comes through in her music of being brave and whatever that means in whatever context, whether it is walking into a room and being your true self, or facing down a disease, or coming out, in a kind of increasingly volatile time for that. So again, I think it's one of those things that shines through, and it hopefully shines through in this interview. I'm sure it does.
Absolutely. And I've noticed on her social media feeds, she's been more willing increasingly to kind of talk about some social issues, like about the impact of social media and mental health today. She is philanthropy is a part of what she does. She obviously has these organizations that she's worked with. So yeah, I mean, I want to mention that just because even if you already are a Sara Bareilles fan, there's more of what she's doing out in the world that you may not be aware of. And I'm kind of curious to see after this, because she's in the middle of some new things, which we get into the interview, and I don't want to ruin that, but I'm wondering how ambitious she really is at this point. She's about my age, and we're kind of in a similar space where I'm entering these new ambitions in my life and trying to create a platform with this podcast and with doing more speaking engagements and maybe creating a coaching program and things that are coming down the pike. And for me, that's a pretty dynamic shift from where I was at in terms of what I was doing like 10 years ago. For her, it seems like a natural outgrowth of the work she's been doing for the last 20 years, but she's still, even now, taking on new ventures. And so she's already almost an EGOT. She's got Emmy nominations, Tony nominations, Grammy Awards. If they turn one of her musicals into a movie, she's almost there.
She's going to get an Oscar nod, yeah.
She's going to get there. So I'm just curious if she has those kinds of ambitions after this moment in history, and if producing and that kind of thing is in her future. It's like she's doing creative things in her career right now, but it wouldn't surprise me if she continued to move into new ventures beyond that.
But I get the sense too that she would be fine if she didn't. I mean, she talked a lot about doing what feels good and what feels natural, and that's admirable. I think a lot of us, we talked about it on, our first episode together of like there's a part of me that wonders if I can allow myself to shift gears and do something else. If I admit to myself that I don't like my career anymore, and how that feels like failure. And, I think people have to give themselves the permission to say, okay, this has run its course. I mean, you were in Maroon 5 for 10 years and had to shift gears. It was your hand was sort of forced in that regard. But some of us come to a place where we have to make that decision, and allowing yourself giving yourself permission to make that choice and to not feel ashamed that you failed or you didn't achieve it or something is something that's got to be a learned behavior, I think. But I get the sense that Sara, being the very evolved person that she is, would just follow the path wherever it led her.
Very much so. And, I just think she says it better than we can. So we might as well just jump right into the conversation we have with Sara. It's wonderful. Stay tuned. Coming right after the intro is our...
We're introing the intro now.
We're introing the intro.
Wait till next episode when we intro the intro to the intro. It's really spectacular. You're going to love it. Here on the Harder to Breathe podcast.
Just wait until I intro the outro.
Oh, now you're being absurd.
Without further ado, our conversation with the wonderful Sara Bareilles right here on the Harder to Breathe podcast. Oh my God. Sara Bareilles.
She's here.
It is so good to see you.
It's so good to see you too. Sorry, I'm like a little early. I jumped on.
It's wonderful. Prompt. We love a prompt superstar.
I'm not always, but today I am, because I'm so excited to see you and talk to you.
I am more than excited to see you again. We've communicated over text and email here and there over the years. we haven't had a real sort of real conversation.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long. Oh, and first off, please meet my co-host, Duck.
Hey,
Hi,
how
Duck.
are you? It's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much.
Oh my gosh, it's my privilege to be here. I'm so happy.
Sara, I want to start off by telling you just how impressed I am by everything you've been doing in your career. I've been watching it mostly from afar, but when I see you doing something new, something creative, a new venture, I'm never surprised, but I'm always astonished at your willingness to take on new challenges and do things that I know at a certain point it wasn't easy to imagine stepping into the life that you're living now. And yet you seem to make it you make it seem easy in the sort of way in which you just grasp a new opportunity and run with it. And from afar, it seems like you're fearless in your creativity and the way that you sort of step into these new ventures, whether it's on stage, it's composing, it's making albums, it's going on live television and doing something without a net.
Dare we say brave? Is
Right.
it too early? Is it too soon?
So glad you said it, so I don't have to.
Contractual obligations to get that worked into the conversation.
Sara, are you fearless, or is there something underneath this that we're not seeing?
Oh my God, I'm the opposite of fearless. Very fearful, actually. But what I have learned, I think, over the last, decade or so, is that fear is a great indicator of what to be walking towards, what spaces have kind of the most information and the most potential for growth. I think it's really normal to want to stay in a comfort zone and really understandable. But every time I've taken a left turn, I have gone through the most sort of transformation, and I have received the most out of the experience. And it's more fun. It's more fun to be like discovering. You've like meeting your own limitations and kind of like checking out where your edges are and watching how they move. But no, I am not a fearless person by any stretch of the imagination. I've had a lifelong, very intimate relationship with fear and anxiety and depression. And it's one of the things I love about how candid you are about your own struggles I just think it's so human and so relatable. And I think oftentimes we see people in positions that we think are powerful or successful, whatever that means. And we just assume that like it's without cost or that they're somehow immune to how fragile it feels to be alive, how hard it is to be alive.
Somebody like yourself who's so impressive and accomplished so much, it's hard to imagine that you have human moments like this. And so when we can explore those things, it's helpful for me. I know it's probably helpful for our listeners as well. I want to take you back for a minute on the topic of vulnerability and fears and that kind of thing, to a memory that I have, a very specific moment in time when we were, good friends. We knew each other well from UCLA. I think we met probably around 1999, somewhere around there. And we did the spring sing together, and you and your a cappella group beat the pants off of us, and you were much better than we were at that point. However, fast forward maybe about 5 years when I and Maroon 5 were doing pretty well. We're out in the world and starting to make a big name for ourselves. And you were just kind of in the process of getting your first record deal and venturing into the world that we were already having some traction in. And I remember a phone call that we had probably around 2004, right after or right before the first time you came on the road with us. I remember you were very vulnerable with me in a way that I hadn't seen before, and you were expressing some fears and sort of reservations about the life that you were entering into, because you were, a musical theater person in your background and comfortable in that environment. And here you were sort of venturing into this new frontier of the pop music world and the music industry and seeing a lot of things that might have been scary. And I remember you expressing to me particular fears about being a woman in this industry and what was going to be asked of you, the kind of demands that would be put on you to be something that you're not, or to push yourself in ways that were uncomfortable for you and your authenticity. So I remember that moment because I wanted to be encouraging, and I don't know if I was successful or I failed at it. I was trying to be something of a mentor, being a year down the road from where you were at. And I'm just curious to hear how you navigated some of those. If I'm remembering it accurately, please tell me if I'm not remembering it accurately. But some of those,
I don't remember it at all,
okay.
But I don't remember like 97% of my own life.
Okay.
But it's those 3% that are just.
But I love being told stories about, I fully believe that this happened. And it sounds you were absolutely someone I would have reached out to ask about stuff like this. And that's very much my nature, to be like, I'm scared. Let me call in friends and perspective. And I find one of my coping mechanisms with fear is like, you have to give it a name. You have to talk about it. You have to demystify it for yourself and just start trying to parse apart what it actually is all about. And these were absolutely some of my major fears about entering into the industry. And I looked up to you all so much, and you guys were so generous with me and took me on tour many times. But yeah, I always felt like I knew I was kind of entering the lion's den on some spiritual level for myself. And I was 27 when I signed when my first record came out. I was 25 when I signed my record deal, and then my record came out at 27. In 2007. And when I think back on that, it feels quite old for like a new artist at this point. Like, people are coming out when they're so young now. But I feel like that was to my benefit. I don't think I have the constitution. I was too impressionable and too much of a people pleaser. And I just don't know that I would have been able to like stay in touch with my own internal compass on how to build something that you said, is authentic to me, which has been sort of my North Star, my brand. Like I'm really trying to find the honesty in me, in everything that I put out. And sometimes more successful than others, but yeah, that sounds very resonant. Those kinds of fears that were coming up, and especially, as a woman, I think the industry's changed a lot. But it's still, especially at that time, there was a lot of this sensation of being sort of pat on the head and like, oh, you're the artist, but you don't really know what you're talking about. And I just felt like I was stomping and screaming and, probably not doing any of those things actually outwardly. But internally, I was like, why is it so hard to get people to listen to me? But I'm also very stubborn. And so I think that actually served me quite well too, is because, if you told me to go left, I was like, well, I'm fucking going right then.
It sounds like you have a really healthy kind of perspective on fear and the things that we've already talked about in terms of, acknowledging, like you said earlier, that fear is sometimes a really exciting thing. And that Ryan said it before, that sometimes you have to notice the difference between fear and excitement, and they're very similar feelings. And you seem like you have leaned into that both in the way that you talked about, but also 20 years ago, being able to say, I need to reach out to somebody because I'm feeling uncomfortable about something. Is that something that you've always had, or was that a learned behavior that you said, I've learned the way to deal with this is to, like you say, demystify it, call it out and ask for help? Or is that something that you've always had?
No, I really had to learn that. And therapy has been like a huge, just a tremendous tool that was pretty stigmatized in my own family. I mean, it's become less so, but it wasn't something generationally, it just really wasn't something a lot of our parents did. I'm 44 now. And, at the time it was like, you didn't go to therapy unless something was really wrong with you, which I feel like there's a case for that, just for everybody. That's
there is something really wrong with all of us.
Yes, we all are we all have these massive hurdles and hardwired patterns.
It's called the 80s.
Yeah.
We all just
It's called being human. But yeah, so I think getting introduced to talk therapy, and it was just like one of the major like game-changing experiences. And I had a shitty therapist when I started, but even just verbalizing what was wrong, listening to myself put words to it was so helpful in just moving the energy around it and trying to make sense of what was happening and where I was stuck. It's just, building the muscle of being able to observe yourself, and building just a little spaciousness around the experience is so helpful.
Where were you in your evolution when you discovered that? Were you midstream in your career? Were you working on things at that time and you realized that you need some help, or where were you in your life?
Yeah, I was in a really confusing relationship at the time, romantic relationship with someone, and I just knew I was really struggling. I knew I was having an outsized reaction to things. My anxiety would take over, and my depression was really acute. Like it would be the kind of thing, I was experiencing a little dissociation of where I just couldn't quite separate from the thoughts in my head, just that I couldn't stop hearing that inner monologue all the time. So it was really distracting, and it made me feel scared when I was trying to explain it. I remember one conversation where I tried to explain it to my mom, and she just didn't relate. She couldn't understand what I was talking about, and that really scared me. For a little while, I was like, is this what developing schizophrenia feels like? As I was really going like, is something really severely wrong, and do I have to get that kind of help? But then I started with a therapist, and those first sessions, I remember I just cried just the whole time, just cried from front to back. And then you go back and you're like, oh, that didn't kill me. I don't know that I'm better, but I'm not worse. And yeah, I just wasn't able to hold my life experience. I couldn't. I was just underwater. I felt like I was underwater all the time.
You mentioned a relationship that was a big impetus for this needing to reach out for help. And so often it's in relationship that we notice what our challenges are. They come up in our relationships most. And I've noticed you've gotten engaged recently. You at least seemingly, congratulations. At least seemingly on social media, it looks like the most romantic relationship. You guys are going on these trips and having this loving embrace with each other. He looks like he's in love with you. You look like you're in love with him. It's wonderful to see. I don't know the guy, but I'm happy for you. And I'm wondering, was the work that you've done, is that where it showed up most? Was in being able to connect in the ways that you are with your partner, or is it showing up more in your work, or both? What's the context of this work?
It's all of the above. And I think with Joe, we met about, I guess it's almost 8 years we've been together at this point. And I think it's a whole different category of work that starts to be done in romantic relationship. I think I had done a lot of work on myself, and I had met my own limitations within relationship. And one of the things that I struggled with a lot, and the pandemic really exacerbated this and was a huge catalyst for me getting on medication, which I am still on to this day. I take Lexapro every day, and I'm fucking so thrilled about it. It is so helpful and makes my quality of life has improved exponentially. And I was very, very scared to start taking medication, and I can talk about that too. But I would meet my edge in terms of it would manifest as this intense feeling of claustrophobia, that I felt trapped, or I felt like I'm giving up too much of myself, or I'm this idea of compromising to sort of make a life with and for someone else was just more than I could manage. I think I'm very used to being incredibly autonomous. I'm a really independent person. I like it that way. I also, run a career that is very demanding. And in a way, as an artist, there's a piece of you that's sort of always spoken for. Like it's almost like I'm married to my muse, and then everything else comes after that. So I think that's a tough with a real life partnership with another person. So Joe and I always say this, like, I would never use the word easy to describe our relationship. Everything that we have and have built together has been really hard won. And because of that, because of learning to stay in the heat of disagreement or discomfort or misunderstanding and watch what happens on the other side of that, I think I was always someone who used to hit the road. I just was one foot out always. And to watch what is so transformative about choosing to stay has been like so eye-opening and so world-building. I mean, it's the first time I think I felt, and I've had I had that weird relationship I was referencing, but I've also had really wonderful, loving partners. But this is the first time I've really felt like I was available to build a real, true partnership, that was what was being asked of me, and I was ready to give it. And first time I feel like I'm at home with someone.
So do you have a sense as to where that tendency comes from? I mean, that's so common. People that have had certain experiences in their upbringing will have this experience of wanting love so badly, and then when things get difficult, wanting to bolt. I'm kind of the opposite. I think I've always been sort of like anxiously attached and just want to kind of hold on to something and don't want to see it. I don't want to let it go.
He's so clingy.
Duck and I go back almost 20 years together now, and it seems like every friend I make becomes a lifelong friend.
That's a nice thing. That's not something to apologize for.
Like, we can't get rid of you.
No, it's wonderful. But I see, there are people that have certain walls up and barriers to that level of intimacy sometimes. And on both sides of the aisle, sort of, there are those on both extremes. It sounds like you've been able to overcome a certain tendency in that regard. And I wonder if you've discovered in your work where that came from and how you've been able to work through that.
I think one of the things that I come back to so often is that it's important to learn how not to abandon yourself for the sake of someone else. That there was a real tendency towards, and I think it's very different than compromise. It's just being able to touch in on sort of what is really true for yourself, and not that still happens to me. It happened. We moved into a house. We moved to Brooklyn about a year ago. And during the move was very chaotic and really hectic, and Joe was out of town and I was doing a lot of it myself. And then I had like gigs planned. It was just a mess. It was a horrible time, horrible time. And I realized in retrospect, like, we were really not good through that move. And I realized part of what was happening is that, like, I had kind of let go of my little voice, my compass that was asking for something. It was asking for needs to be met, for whatever, a certain way of showing up. This is a tendency of mine, is just to abandon myself. And then I feel it breeds resentment because I'm not asking for what I need. And it breeds mistrust because my projection is telling me that, like, they're not able to meet my needs, but I'm not really, there's no interaction. I'm not asking, I'm not giving anyone the opportunity to show up because I'm disappearing. Does that make sense? That's been a really big one. So it's the challenge is to, like, advocate for yourself and trust that the other person is able to hold that. And then, you don't always get your needs met. That's also just a piece of it, that not everything, it's not beautiful all the time. Neither is life.
Between compromise and losing yourself, where compromise is something you hopefully are doing willingly for the sake of your partner, the sake of your relationship. You're saying, I'm willing to give up a piece of this to meet you halfway, rather than give up myself or lose myself, unwillingly.
So how have you been able to do that in your career, walking into the spaces that you walk into, being self-admittedly something of a people pleaser, but also being this creative force who has a lot to say? How have you navigated that tendency of being a people pleaser with what you've needed to do to be the head of this business and this career that is Sara Bareilles?
I think sometimes, I'm still sort of figuring that part out. I mean, it's so nice when you have these spaces where it feels really obvious. Like when I'm like making the work feels really clean and easy to me. It's so available to understand, like, I love making this thing, or I'm really moved in this direction, or I love how this song is coming together, or I love this kind of collaboration. It's just all the business stuff that starts to get, it just gets mucky, and you're dealing with other people's personalities and their baggage and all that stuff. One of the tricks that I have learned to help myself make sure that I'm staying in alignment is just to slow down. I used to be a really quick yes. I would say yes to everything, and I have really turned into a no before a yes. And I'm very reticent to commit to something until I'm sure I want to be there, because there's a lot that comes with this. There's a lot that comes with this job, as you know, that is like, I can't believe this is a job. Like, I'm doing the thing I love more than anything else, and I actually can sustain a lifestyle from it. But there's also a lot that is really taxing and really confusing and really, I think the interfacing with what it means to be a public person is a really confusing space for me. And there's a lot about it that I don't like and that I think is really toxic. So I try to slow down my decision-making process and make sure that I'm really committing to things that I know I want to be a part of, which means that, like, I don't make records that often. I don't just sign on to new projects that often. I have been burned so many times by having too many things on my plate, which I still can do to a certain extent, but the slowing down, I think, is really, really beneficial. And I see it so often in these young artists. Like, I'm so glad to hear people talking about their mental health. I think there's a real blind spot around the preventative measures to take, that, like, to be able to watch when something is starting to feel like too much. I think there's more of that. I think people are more attuned to that now than they used to be, certainly than I was. Because I think especially as you're just breaking, there's going to be, they will ask of you until you say no. And nobody wants to say no when it's, when you're first starting out, because you've worked so hard to get there. So, but I think I see a lot of burnout and a lot of anxious behavior and a lot of depressive behavior, and people are really struggling.
It means even more to us that you agreed to be on the podcast, because it means that you really want to be here. So we appreciate that.
I really want to be here. I really do.
What you said reminds me actually of something that I saw, on whether it's on TikTok or something, was an interview with Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, who said they have a phrase that they've used that says no is a full sentence.
Right.
And that all you need to, you don't have to explain yourself. If something is uncomfortable for you or something you don't want to do, you can say no. And you don't have to hem and haw and say, I'm really sorry, I don't want to do. No, they learned at an early age that, when something felt wrong or something felt like they didn't want to do it, they had the autonomy and the power to say no. And I think that's a really important message, especially for young artists to learn within the context of staying true to yourself, like we talked about before.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's tricky, right? Like, we talk about this a lot. I talk about this a lot with Joe, because I am I'm in my 40s, and I think the business has changed so much. I think you still have to be willing to work really hard. Like, it's not an easy thing, what any of us are trying to do, to carve out a place for yourself in an industry that is so big and massive, at least, speaking from the music or even in theater. It will be a very demanding path to walk. So, sometimes when I see behavior that's like, just too much, everything got too much. And as much as it's, the tension between wanting to applaud taking care of yourself and also this is what it is. It's fucking hard. It's really, really hard. It's just an interesting thing to notice as I'm not a young person coming up in this industry. I just think, but I can't imagine the pressures of, thank God we didn't have social media the way that they have it. I just, no thank you. I hate it.
Sara, I want to take this opportunity to say something to you, which I don't know if it'll be a surprise because you read my book, which I appreciate, by the way, and the fact that you were so kind as to provide a blurb for the jacket, it was that touched my heart. It was really wonderful. You mentioned just coming up and being in that moment when you want to say yes to everything and pressures that you're under. From my perspective, when you were in that moment or just approaching that moment, and Maroon 5 was already an international success, and you started coming on the road with us, like overseas to London. I wanted so bad because of our relationship and because of the conversation I referenced, which you don't remember, but I do.
I believe you. I believe you.
I wanted so badly to be something of a mentor to you, or somebody that was somebody you could look to as, this isn't as hard as it looks. It's not as scary and traumatic as it seems. And I was just really going through possibly the worst time in my life, or beginning to go through the worst time in my life. And in a lot of ways, acting out and behaving in ways which were certainly not taking care of me and probably wounding others as well. And in my memory, I feel like I disappointed you. And I want to apologize to you for whatever extent I contributed to the extent to which that moment in your life was already scary and may have seemed even scarier seeing a friend of yours going through what I was going through. If you could tell that I was going through those things, I felt like I dropped the ball and I was not the friend that I could have been, or the person that could have maybe assuaged those fears just a little bit. And it's one of the regrets that I've had for 20 years. And I've considered it in my amends, in the 9th step, and now is as good a time as any to apologize, not in a formal AA kind of way, but just in a, like, as a friend to friend. I just wanted you to know that I feel badly about that. And I wish I could turn back time and be a different person in that moment. Obviously, time has allowed me to grow and to heal. But I'm sorry that in that moment I wasn't the person that I should have been or could have been.
Oh, I really appreciate you saying that, Ryan. But I think, yeah, I think everything happens for a reason. I think that in a certain way, I mean, it certainly was, you were not in a vacuum. I think I was experiencing watching my bandmates, not just my friends in Maroon 5 and, and beyond, but also my bandmates. Also, I was the only woman around, and
yeah,
except for, if you guys had girlfriends or, partners, whatever. But I think it was such an important time of growth and learning, and in a way kind of helped me turn inward to find my own, because I wouldn't have put any of that responsibility on you. I don't think there's something you didn't live up to. I really don't. I think it was a larger sort of universal lesson that was happening for me that helped me kind of crystallize that I had to be my own kind of compass moving forward. And I think that was a really good and healthy thing. And, I really appreciate what you're saying, but you can put that down. It's not something you need to carry around at all.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to say that. It's something I've been wanting to say for a long time. I'm curious, in that moment of learning and transition from aspiring to being, that's a big change in your life. And ever since, you've been a star, you've been successful, you've been this force of nature. I wonder, what kind of challenges do you face now? Do they compare to the kind of challenges you faced back then? Are they different? Are they the same challenges?
I think that, I'm not sure that there's a delineation. I don't know that there ever feels like there's an arrival point. Like, I don't feel like I am versus aspiring. I'm always aspiring, and I'm still very susceptible to all of those comparisons about how much I'm not doing and not achieving. And I have a much more peaceful relationship with those voices in my head at this point. I'm really grateful for what I have accomplished, and I'm really happy with the life that I live. But I would be lying if I didn't say that looking around at the, contemporary music scene, I'm like, I guess I don't belong here. I don't know where I fit in any of this, but that felt like I never felt like I fit in. Which is why moving into musical theater, which, as you mentioned, was something I did as a kid and a space I was really comfortable in, making theater, I have found, is a tremendous balm for creative confusion. Not because it's easy, but because for me, it has felt like a coming home of sorts. And I love the very profound collaboration and the lack of, because of the nature of the mechanics of the theater business, everything is so ephemeral. So this like underbelly of competition just doesn't exist in the same way here. It's not that there aren't competitive people here and there's assholes like it's like every other industry, but there's just the chance that either you have worked or will worked with someone who's been doing a different show, so there's just a lot of interchange and interplay amongst the members of this community. So it really does feel like a family in a way that I always struggled to find my place in the music industry. So I still aspire, in a lot of ways. I've been thinking a lot about another record, and I listened to Chapel Roan, but that's not that wouldn't be a record I make, and I love it. But there's a place where I'm like, I just don't know. There's feels like such a chasm between what I love to listen to and what I create. And sometimes I don't know what to do with that. But I say all this to just say that I don't think there's an arrival. I really don't. I think it's just, you're always looking for the next thing that will, light the flame of creativity or passion or excitement for what you make. Don't you think? I don't know. Do you guys feel that way?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, that's a shift that I've had in my thinking. I think for a long time after leaving the band, it was kind of like, well, I already did that and I'll just do something else now. Or I'll continue to make records and to stay in that lane. And I realized I was just kind of treading water. When I started recovery, I had a new perspective where it's like there's a whole life out there, and life has seasons to it. It doesn't have to be, if my 20s was one thing, my 40s can be something totally different. And that openness to new possibilities and opportunities has led me into ventures that I never could have seen coming had I been closed off in the way that I used to be. And now I've written a book, and I've started a podcast, and I'm doing speaking, and I'm planning other media and things that I'm working on. And it embraces my past. Obviously my past is still a part of what I do, but the new things that come into my life, they offer an opportunity to bring excitement that I didn't know could exist in midlife and the second half of your life. I like the idea that I don't know what I'm going to be doing in my 60s. It's kind of interesting and exciting. It's like I might have a different creative venture. I might have a business. I might have a lot of things that I can't even foresee. And that's so interesting. I'm realizing we've totally missed an opportunity thus far in that I have an ace up my sleeve. Duck is a musical theater guy.
Hey.
Okay. I've been waiting for the tee up. So Ryan, you can take a break. I've got everything prepared here.
The Waitress podcast.
No. Oh, are you kidding? Listen, we have a piano in the house, and my wife is an amazing musical theater performer. We have a son who's into musical theater. We sit around, we sing all the time. Waitress is in heavy rotation. I don't audition much anymore for musical theater, but now that if I ever do, Never Ever Getting Rid of Me is now a go-to audition song for me. I love it. But I have a ton of questions about your kind of move into theater now. First of which being, as we've talked about, you grew up as, in musical theater. And so the transition was actually from musical theater to being a pop star was probably more difficult than the transition now of being a pop star who's now starting to do Broadway and things like that. That's coming home. But I would imagine that there would have been some trepidation from you, as we've seen other, pop stars or actors step into shows as sort of a casting gimmick to like boost sales. So in Grease or Cabaret or, Chicago, we've seen actors who may not be the best singers or whatever. But for you, like I said, having that pedigree, was there a sense of you needed to sort of let everybody know, like, hey guys, I can actually do this. It's okay. Like, did you feel a need to prove yourself, or, like you say, knowing that this community is hopefully very welcoming and embracing of you, but did you feel a sense of like having to prove yourself all over again in a new world, even though it's something that was not alien to you?
Yeah, I definitely, I think that I just have such a tremendous amount of respect and sort of awe for the level of craft and discipline that happens in the theater industry. I mean, especially when I first started working on Waitress, I just couldn't get over, I'm like, they 8 shows a week. They do rehearsals on top of that. They do outside performances and publicity and stuff outside of that. They're making less money than anybody. I mean, like the best paid Broadway actor, maybe it's changing a little bit now and you get like a star casting or something, but like the best paid Broadway actors that are making a living are making so much less money than people in the music industry or on film or television. So there's an element about like, you don't do this to get rich and famous. No one's coming to the theater because they want the entire world to know who they are, because nobody watches. Nobody watches the Tonys. No, like the biggest Broadway stars are still widely unknown to the global kind of zeitgeist and consciousness. So what I love about that is it means that there's this little niche community that just loves what they love because they love it. And there's something that brings them back to this form and this medium and this sense of belonging that really, really spoke to me. And I have so much respect for it that I didn't want to fall on my face, and I wanted to honor the form by being good at it. And I have still so much to learn. But I do think I have such a deep love and my familiarity with the pieces of it that I know, the shows that I listened to growing up. And I think I'm a quick study in this world, but I look around at my contemporaries and my friends in this industry, and they just blow me away. The amount of discipline and how quick they have to be, how fast they have to be to learn, to memorize, to be facile, to just the agility that is required of you to be on stage and to work with what goes wrong. It's fascinating and it's so much fun. And I just love it. I love it so much.
Well, it shows. We watched the pro shot of Waitress the other night, and just loved watching it. And of course, we're talking about the time that you stepped into the role of Jenna, in Waitress. But then also moving on to what anybody our age, it has to have been the holy grail of doing Into the Woods on Broadway. And my question is, I see a lot of similarities, and maybe you do too, between Jenna and the baker's wife in terms of the role you played in Into the Woods. In terms of, they're both women who are yearning for more. They're women who possibly make some poor decisions in those moments, in that search. A child is central to a lot of those. I don't want spoilers for Into the Woods, a 40-year-old musical. I'm not going to give it away. But was that something that those two roles offered? I mean, obviously, you wrote Waitress, so it's something, of course, you poured yourself into. But those similarities of those characters, was there something of Sara in both of them that allowed you to connect with them, that search for wanting more, et cetera?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I think if I'm really honest, I just don't have the kind of technique to be able to be a chameleon as an actor. Like I'm still learning so much, and I'm not sure if that's really what my fastball would be. I mean, I watch these incredible people seem like they just turn into someone else, and the person I know just disappears completely. I don't think that's really it's not my skill set. But I do think that, yeah, the truth of these women, what I love about them both is that they're messy, they're complicated, they're trying to do good and they make bad choices. And I just think that's so relatable and so human. And yeah, that ache, that like longing for more. And I do think there's a thread of connectivity with reconciling the person you have become with the person you thought you would be. I think that's really, that theme lives in both of these roles really, really boldly for me. And I just think that's also a really relatable place to, you know, we all have dreams about our lives. Like when you were talking about the person you were, Ryan, and like, we're not stuck in time either. You know, like we of course we evolve and of course we become something new. But at some point when you do any level of reflection, you're like, boy, I really didn't show up as that person I was imagining I would become. And sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse, sometimes, you know, it's just different. But I do think that is what I like the idea of playing complicated, sort of messy people, because that feels more like real life to me. I mean, granted, it's a fairy tale. It's all about fairy tales.
But we didn't even talk about the messiness of your character on Girls 5 Eva as well.
Oh, yeah. She's a hot mess. Yeah.
I'm so excited to see that you are writing a new musical.
Next question. Is there an element of what we've talked about in that project?
Exactly.
Yes, we're doing an adaptation of a book called The Interestings by Meg Wolitzer. And Sarah Rule is writing the book. I'm writing the music. It's been an absolute joy. I read this book, and I have been sent some things over the years after Waitress. And this was the first thing that I just felt everything inside of me wake up and want to make music out of this. These characters it's about a group of friends who meet at an arts summer camp in high school. And it just follows them through their lives. And it explores themes of talent. What does it mean to have talent? What does it mean to have success? What does it mean to be coming from different class? Jealousy, there's grief and loss, and it's just very human. There's no big spectacle moment. It's just really explores these very universal themes about what is enough and when can you stop kind of reaching for more. And
sounds like this podcast.
I know. And I just love it. I'm so excited to, we're still in very early stages, of course. These things take many years, but yeah, it's moving quickly, to be honest. It's felt like a really fertile collaboration, so it's just coming quickly.
Well, this ends the musical theater portion, but I can say, as the spokesman for that community, we're all very excited for it. Okay, Ryan, back to our regularly scheduled mental health programming.
Well, what strikes me is that you also are doing something that kind of crosses the line between the music industry, the pop performance, and the Broadway musical thing, where you're doing some performances that are full orchestra at the Hollywood Bowl and the Kennedy Center, which to me, as a performer, you know, you could play a soccer stadium for 100,000 people, but playing at the Hollywood Bowl with a full orchestra, given your background and the kind of things that you've done, and that to me seems like the culmination of a lot of things. I don't know if you feel that.
You're done, Sarah. There's nothing.
I'm done. There's nowhere else to go.
Yeah, you can just hang them up.
Oh God, I know. It is such a moment. You know, every once in a while you get to those places where you have these mile markers where you're like, that is really something I have dreamed about, like really dreamed about, being at a place in my life and my career where I could, you know, explore the option of playing with an orchestra. And yeah, it happened really organically, which was so nice. They had a slot in their summer programming. And then I talked with my team and it's like, I think I really want to do this. I don't exactly feel entirely ready. I would have loved to have a new record or, something, but it just felt like I don't want to miss this opportunity to collaborate in this way. And, I haven't been playing, I haven't been performing much. So it felt like, let's blow it out. So we're doing the Hollywood Bowl and then 3 nights at the Kennedy Center. And it will be a little bit of, I'll be doing a couple of songs. I'll be doing something from Into the Woods. I'll be doing a couple things from Waitress. I'm going to debut one of the songs from The Interstings. And so there will be a musical theater component, as you said, and also, inviting some friends and some guests. And I think it will be really, really fun. My whole family is coming, so get ready.
That's so interesting because, the version of you that I saw so many times perform was like in a cafe.
Totally.
At a piano.
Teeny tiny, yeah.
And just you in a very singer-songwriter kind of vibe. And then, of course, the world got to see you on live TV. You did Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even bring up Superstar.
I mean,
I was like, thank you.
That kind of performance is a whole other version of you. And it sounds to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, that this is an opportunity to kind of bring those worlds together, to be the singer-songwriter and also be the Broadway performer.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think that's spot on. I think I'm always looking for that sweet spot. I've had the incredible fortune of playing some really sizable venues, and there is something I miss about slightly smaller venues when I am on those big stages. So I think there's a part of me that is kind of looking for the sweet spot of how do you still make it feel like a very singular, intimate experience. And that's just selfishly because I enjoy that more than I enjoy feeling like there was a fourth wall up. And I just, I love the interaction. I love talking to the audience. There's a music venue in New York City called Rockwood Music Hall, which I'm sure you know very well. We did some benefits. They were, ran out of funding, basically, is what happened, and really fell on some hard times. And so we were doing some benefit performances for them. And so it was just me and a piano at Rockwood, which held, I don't know, all of 200 people, I think, at the most. And boy, I just loved it. I miss that size show, which, there's no reason that can't be something I do more often. But I didn't know how much I missed that size show. Of just really, it felt like I could see every single face in the room, and we were having a conversation, and then I would sing some songs, and then we'd have another conversation. It was so alive, and it felt so unique. Whereas there's something beautiful about building a big, show. But I think I love a conversation. I think there's so much to mine out of that.
Well, Sara, I could have a conversation with you for hours. This has been amazing. I know you have other interviews to get to, and I want to let you get to that. But I just want to say to you, this has been such a pleasure and a long time coming for me. And I know, Duck, I think I could speak for you that this was a pretty awesome. Big deal for you.
It was really spectacular.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations. I'm so in such admiration of what you're doing and your mission statement around all of the work you're putting into the world right now. It's just really cool, and I'm saying I'm proud of you seems weird, but I am. I feel I'm proud to be your friend, and I'm grateful for what you do. Wow. Both of you, Duck. You and me, besties.
Thank you.
That means so much.
Come play at my house, and we'll sing.
Okay, you got it.
You know how much I respect you, Sara. So to hear you say that really means a lot to me. And thank you again for your time and just for everything that you do. You're wonderful. So thank you for coming on our show. We love you.
My pleasure. Love you guys. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Sounds
okay.
good.
Bye. Bye, guys.